It has been a very cool and slow spring here, with below seasonal temperatures both during the day and at nighttime. This has pushed back many of my planting dates and slowed germination on directly seeded crops. Even with the slow start, the spring garden can't wait forever. If I want to reach 650 pounds of food, the spring garden needs to carry a lot of weight. And that begins by getting it planted. The nice thing about planting spring crops is that you start getting paid back pretty quickly. The first crop I get to harvest from my garden is lettuce. I usually harvest lettuce a couple weeks after transplanting it into the garden. It is one of my favorite spring crops to plant because the seedlings add instant color to the garden. I plant my lettuce 4 per square foot. I have found a good first succession planting of a lettuce for my family is about 24 plants. I had uneven germination with my lettuce. Some plants are huge and crowded out their neighbors, while others stayed on the smaller side. Once they root in, I'll harvest the outer leaves of the larger plants to prevent them from crowding out the smaller ones any further and allow those smaller plants to fill in and catch up. I have faith with some sunny days and a little bit more heat, this planting will look a lot more even. Be sure to subscribe to see the first harvest and to follow along for updates. Now, if lettuce is the first crop I get to harvest, broccoli is a crop that I rely on for sheer volume. I have planted 3 patches of broccoli. The first one is pretty much my whole large in-ground bed. Broccoli loves nitrogen, and my early spring soil test shows that my soil doesn't have much, so I'm adding a good amount of blood meal to each planting hole. I'm giving broccoli a larger spacing this year, about 2 feet apart, in hopes of having larger heads for an overall larger yield. This bed has 37 broccoli plants. I normally only plant broccoli in ground and save my raised bed space for things that prefer the well-draining soil. But this year I have more raised bed space and I wanted to see if the broccoli would perform differently in the raised beds than in ground. I'm thinking the soil temperature will warm faster, giving the broccoli faster growth. Or will the warm temperatures cause the broccoli to form heads prematurely? With the same spacing as the in-ground beds, I was able to fit 10 broccoli plants here. Moving into the front yard, I planted 27 broccoli plants. I put these cages over them to protect them from bunnies. I have struggled to grow decent vegetable plants in my front yard for a couple seasons now, and I think it comes down to nutrient levels. So I'll be watching these plants very closely to make sure that they are keeping up with the broccoli plants in the backyard. In total this spring, I planted out 74 broccoli plants throughout the whole garden. With an average head size of about 0.4 pounds, I'm estimating a 30-pound harvest of broccoli. Alongside all that broccoli, I'm planting cabbage this spring. I'm planting a small patch of dwarf cabbages called Tiara. I'm trying a 1-foot spacing for these little guys. Back in the front yard, I planted 6 golden acre cabbages. These are a larger cabbage along my pathway. I love the look of the bold cabbage leaves next to my thyme ground cover. I'm estimating a harvest of 18 pounds of cabbage. Golden Acre should produce heads that are around 3 to 5 pounds, so the planting of 6 alone should hit that goal without help from the dwarf cabbages. I treat both my broccoli and cabbage with BT to control the cabbage moth, which I have already seen flying around the garden. After getting all the brassicas planted, I move on to another major staple crop in my garden. Onions. In both areas where I'm planting onions, I add some peat moss as organic matter and some blood meal for nitrogen. At this stage in the onion's life, nitrogen is important to get lots of nice leafy growth. I started my onions in these red solo cups, about 10 onions per cup. To plant them, I gently tease the roots and separate the individual onion seedlings. I'm so happy with how healthy and large the root systems are on these seedlings, so much better than last year. My preferred spacing for onions is 4 per square foot. I want large onions, and I find this spacing with the variety Eliza Craig gives me the large onions I'm looking for. Now, I was quickly running out of light this evening, but I did treat the onions with BT to help with the allium leaf miner. And while I'm thinking about what we actually eat throughout this season, a goal of mine is to preserve some more ready-made meals that I can pull from the freezer and put into the oven on nights I just don't want to cook, instead of preserving everything as individual ingredients. With that in mind, I'm planting lots of carrots this spring, which would normally be more of a succession planting in the fall for me. I'm doing 20 square feet of carrots with an estimated yield of 20 pounds. I'm looking to use a lot of these carrots in chicken pot pies and can up some chicken soup for cold and flu season, as well as having some for fresh eating. But when it comes to maximum production in the spring garden, nothing quite beats potatoes. I went into more detail on how I plant my potatoes in this video if you want to check it out. I planted 46 square feet of potatoes with an estimated harvest of 72 pounds. And because my space is limited, I'm trying to make my slower growing crops work double duty this season. With my potatoes, I'm experimenting with interplanting some quick maturing crops between them. I have planted radishes, kale, bok choy, toi choy, spinach, and salad turnips planted between them, all which have germinated and are doing well so far. I returned to the onions to interplant some quick maturing crops to fill in while the onions are getting going. In my skinny bed planting, I sowed some arugula seeds between the onions. I'm really looking forward to using some of that arugula on pizzas here soon. Arugula is a short-lived crop. As soon as the heat comes, and I do hope the heat will come at some point this season, it'll be done, which will be perfect timing because the onions will need the space by then. In my other planting of onions, I'm sowing radishes. The radishes will be ready in about 30 days and harvested out before the onions need that room. In total, I planted 80 onions with an estimated harvest of 40 pounds. I'm really trying to think of the garden in layers this year, and another place I'm doing that is with my tomatoes. I'm interplanting beets between my tomatoes. On either side of where my future tomato plantings will go, when the temperatures finally get on board, I'm seeding 2 beets. The beets will begin to grow before the tomatoes get planted and will finish up while the tomatoes get established, before the tomatoes really need that space. Of course, maximizing space isn't just happening at the ground level. One of the main benefits of my new garden redesign was how much more vertical space I have for growing. For the springtime, I'm planting peas along most of the backs of my raised beds, as well as some of the arch trellises. Peas like the cooler weather of spring and will be done producing by the time the heat-loving crops will need the space on the trellises. The pea variety I'm planting on the arch trellises this year has a beautiful pink bloom, which I cannot wait to see. I'm going to let at least one of the plants go to seed for next season. I want to start saving more seeds because man oh man have the seed prices started getting expensive. Pea and bean seeds are relatively easy to save, so I'm starting there. And I might experiment with some tomato and flower seed saving as well. But not every part of my garden plan is going exactly as I imagined it would. This year I had planned to mostly plant bush green beans because my pole green beans got eaten up by the birds last year. They are scheduled to go in as a succession crop after my broccoli is done producing. But the problem is that we are out of green beans now. And if I just stick to my current plan, we won't have any fresh green beans until late August. And we need green beans sooner than that. I have this large pot that is empty. I added a tallow bliss that I had kicking around and some extra strings for more places for the green beans to climb. I sowed pole green beans with some help, of course. Temperature-wise, it's still a little cool for things like green beans, but the soil in this black pot should warm up faster, and the soil shouldn't stay so moist that the seeds will rot. A problem you can have when you sow green beans when it is too cold outside. I'm hoping this will get us into green beans sooner than if I had planted them in the ground somewhere else. It's definitely better than following my current plan. I also think the birds will leave the baby green beans alone because this pot is so close to the house. I'll have 12 green beans in this pot, and my go-to estimate for pull green beans is about £1 per plant. But because this obelisk is shorter than my arch trellises, I'm adjusting that estimate to about £0.5 per plant, for a total of 6 pounds from this pot of green beans. Right now, everything in the garden looks tiny, and there's parts of the garden that still look very patchy, but this is exactly where the garden gets set into motion for the season. It's crazy to think that all these small plants and seeds that you can't even see will produce hundreds of pounds of food in just a few short months. Be sure to subscribe to see updates and to see if I'll hit my goal of 650 pounds of fresh homegrown food from my small suburban yard.